January 2026, Trump announces, "We require Greenland for national security purposes. One way or another, we will acquire it." Media outlets react with fury. Commentators dismiss it as ridiculous. Everybody's ridiculing the statement. However, during that identical week, critical metals shares jump 116%. BlackRock discreetly purchases Greenland mining stocks. Investment funds accumulate rare earth exploration companies. Wall Street isn't mocking. Wall Street is repositioning because Greenland isn't frozen wasteland. It represents the 8th largest rare earth reserves on the planet. If Beijing secures control initially, Washington forfeits the capacity to manufacture AI processors, electric vehicle batteries, F-35 aircraft, and every sophisticated weapons platform that characterizes contemporary military strength. This represents a $3 trillion resource conflict, and Beijing is prevailing. We're observing the most significant territorial acquisition since Alaska, and it's unfolding currently. Greenland is documented as the 8th largest rare earth reserves globally. However, that figure is obsolete because the assessments that generated that classification were completed before comprehensive exploration of the Tanbreez and Kvanefjeld reserves. The Tanbreez Reserve contains 28.2 million tons of rare earth materials, the largest prospective deposit on the planet. For context, Beijing's Bayan Obo facility, presently the planet's largest functioning source, contains 48 million tons of rare earth oxides. However, Bayan Obo has operated for 70 years. It's approaching exhaustion. Tanbreez is unexploited virgin territory with contemporary extraction methodology ready for deployment. Then there's Kvanefjeld. This reserve holds 370,000 tons of heavy rare earth materials. Heavy rare earths represent the crucial elements, the materials you require for weapons platforms, AI processor manufacturing, and electric vehicle engines. They constitute less than 1% of worldwide production, yet are accountable for 100% of sophisticated military and technological capability. Without heavy rare earths, you cannot manufacture an F-35. You cannot manufacture autonomous aircraft. You cannot energize electric vehicles. Kvanefjeld possesses the second largest heavy rare earth deposits globally. Complete estimated worth if entirely developed over 50 years, $3 trillion. Here's what most individuals don't comprehend. Rare earth elements aren't genuinely rare regarding abundance. What renders them rare is the capacity to extract and refine them safely and economically. Extraction is relatively uncomplicated, but isolating them into individual materials, eliminating radioactive contaminants, and processing them into functional materials is extraordinarily complicated and environmentally hazardous. Let's discuss what's genuinely in Greenland and why it holds strategic significance. Neodymium, essential for permanent magnets utilized in EV engines and wind generators. Greenland possesses 25% of worldwide deposits. Every Tesla, every electric automobile on highways uses neodymium magnets. No neodymium, no EV sector. Dysprosium employed in high-performance magnets that endure extreme temperatures. Indispensable for F-35 fighters, missile targeting platforms, and next-generation surveillance. Beijing dominates 95% of worldwide provision. If Beijing terminates exports, Washington's defense manufacturing halts within months. Greenland possesses sufficient dysprosium to eliminate that stranglehold. Terbium, crucial for laser-guided projectiles and military sonar platforms. Kvanefjeld holds the second largest terbium deposits globally, the largest also in Beijing's territory. This is the Saudi Arabia parallel everybody's overlooking. Whoever dominates rare earth provision dominates the economy of the 21st century. The identical way whoever dominated petroleum dominated the 20th. The distinction is, petroleum has alternatives. Rare earths don't. There exists no substitute material that performs what neodymium performs. The physics doesn't permit it. From 2018 to 2023, Greenland's administration rejected numerous mining operations due to environmental opposition. The uranium concentration in Kvanefjeld became a political controversy. The operation stalled. Nothing advanced. January 2026, Trump issues his declaration. Within days, critical metals shares surge. Blue Jay mining jumped 62%. Energy transition. Minerals observes institutional purchasing spike. The indication is obvious. Washington is transforming policy. The Pentagon is participating. These operations are restarting. American corporations are currently in discussions with Copenhagen and Washington to obtain financing and expedite authorizations. The U.S. administration is providing loan assurances, but Beijing has observed, and they're repositioning too, because whoever secures Greenland dominates the subsequent 50 years of technological rivalry. And currently, that competition is completely open. Beijing didn't accidentally conclude controlling 70% of worldwide rare earth manufacturing. This was an intentional 40-year approach, and it commenced with a solitary declaration. 1980s, Deng Xiaoping, designer of contemporary Beijing's economic ascent, famously stated, "The Middle East possesses petroleum, Beijing possesses rare earths." That wasn't a casual remark, it was a strategic mandate. Beijing commenced investing substantially in rare earth extraction and refining methodology. They constructed the knowledge, they constructed the infrastructure, they accepted the environmental consequences that other nations refused to tolerate. 1990s and 2000s, Beijing flooded the worldwide marketplace with inexpensive rare earths. Values crashed. Facilities in the United States, Australia, and other nations couldn't compete. They terminated operations. Mountain Pass in California, once the planet's leading rare earth manufacturer, closed in 2002. Not because the reserves depleted, because Beijing sold rare earths below the expense of manufacturing until the competition vanished. Classic economic conflict. By 2010, Beijing dominated the provision, and then they demonstrated what that dominance genuinely signified. September 2010, territorial conflict over the Senkaku Islands between Beijing and Tokyo. A Chinese fishing vessel collides with Japanese maritime security vessels. Tokyo arrests the commander. Beijing responds, but not with military strength. They terminated rare earth exports to Tokyo completely. No formal declaration, no official prohibition. Chinese customs simply halted processing export deliveries. Within 2 months, Tokyo's electronics manufacturing ground to standstill. Toyota, Sony, Panasonic, every major Japanese industrial corporation dependent on rare earth magnets, phosphors, and catalysts confronted manufacturing shutdowns. Tokyo's economy, the third largest globally, was being suffocated by the invisible force of supply chain dominance. Tokyo capitulated, released the commander, and then comprehended the instruction. They immediately commenced investing in rare earth facilities in Australia and Vietnam, diversifying provision, constructing strategic stockpiles because they had just witnessed rare earths employed as an economic weapon in real time. Here's the instruction the planet comprehended in 2010. Beijing doesn't require invading Taiwan. Beijing doesn't require launching missiles at U.S. carrier formations. If Beijing dominates rare earth provision, they can cripple entire sectors, entire economies, without a solitary shot discharged. And Washington still hasn't completely internalized this instruction. 2019, trade conflict escalates between Trump and Xi Jinping. Tariffs on hundreds of billions in commodities. And then Xi conducts a visit. He tours a rare earth refining installation in Jiangxi province. State media documents it extensively. The message is obvious. Beijing is considering weaponizing rare earth exports against the United States. The threat is implicit but unmistakable. Pentagon analyzes the scenario. The evaluation is catastrophic. If Beijing terminates rare earth exports, U.S. defense manufacturers forfeit the capacity to manufacture F-35 fighters, Patriot missiles, precision-guided munitions, and sophisticated radar platforms. Not eventually, within months. Because Washington possesses no refining capacity. We import 80% of our rare earths from Beijing. So why can't Washington just manufacture its own? Mountain Pass Mine in California restarted functions in 2018. The reserve is there, the extraction is operational. But here's the complication: refining. Extracting rare earth ore is relatively simple. You excavate it, but isolating rare earths into individual materials, eliminating radioactive thorium and other contaminants, and processing them into functional materials is incredibly complicated and environmentally hazardous. Beijing spent 30 years constructing refining methodology. They accepted the contamination. They constructed the chemical installations. They trained the specialists. Washington terminated that entire sector. And today, even though Mountain Pass is extracting ore in California, they must transport it to Beijing for refining. We excavate the materials on American territory, and transmit them to our strategic competitor to be processed. That's the constraint. Even if Washington commences extraction in Greenland tomorrow, without refining capacity in North America or Europe, we're still dependent on Beijing. That's why Beijing isn't just concerned about forfeiting Greenland's reserves. They're terrified of Washington constructing rare earth refining installations outside Chinese dominance because that eliminates the monopoly. And here's why Greenland is the crucial battleground. If the US obtains Greenland's extraction rights and constructs refining installations in North America or allied European nations, Beijing forfeits leverage. Their 40-year investment in rare earth superiority gets undermined. They cannot threaten export terminations anymore because alternative provision exists. But if Beijing secures Greenland through proxy investments, through obstructing American corporations, through obtaining extraction rights before the US repositions, then the monopoly is permanent. Game concluded. Washington remains dependent, and that dependency becomes the invisible weapon Beijing can deploy whenever geopolitical tensions escalate. This is what's transpiring currently. 2010s, while Washington concentrated on the Middle East, on Afghanistan, on Syria, Beijing quietly commenced positioning in Greenland. No headlines, no media focus, just calculated investments and strategic relationships. 2016, Shenghe Resources, a Chinese rare earth refining corporation, acquires a 12.5% stake in Greenland Minerals, the corporation that dominates the Kvanefjeld deposit, the one with 370,000 tons of heavy rare earths. This isn't a financial investment. This is strategic positioning. Shenghe doesn't care about quarterly returns. They care about access. Same year, China General Nuclear Power Corporation attempts to acquire a uranium extraction operation in Greenland. Kvanefjeld contains uranium alongside rare earths. Beijing wants both. Denmark and the United States discover the transaction at the final moment and obstruct it. But the intention is obvious. Beijing is attempting to purchase dominance of Greenland's crucial mineral resources piece by piece. 2018, China Communications Construction Company submits on a contract to construct 3 new airports in Greenland: Nuuk, Ilulissat, and Qaqortoq. These aren't just civilian infrastructure operations. The Pentagon analyzes the proposal and realizes the airports would grant Beijing de facto dominance over key Arctic transit points. They immediately warn Copenhagen, if Beijing constructs these airports, we forfeit Arctic surveillance capabilities. Our capacity to monitor submarine activity and track missile launches gets compromised. Denmark panics. They cannot permit Beijing to construct the airports. But Greenland requires the infrastructure, so Denmark commits 555 million of their own resources to construct the airports themselves. Resources they don't possess in the budget. They assume debt to prevent Chinese dominance. Beijing didn't require invading Greenland. They just required offering financing, and suddenly, Western authorities are scrambling to outbid them. Here's the pattern. Beijing doesn't require military occupation. They don't require territorial conquest. They just require owning the infrastructure and dominating the extraction rights. Once they possess that, they dominate access, and access is everything. Now, let's discuss why Greenland is vulnerable. 56,000 individuals reside in Greenland. 80% are Inuit. They desire independence from Denmark, but independence demands economic self-sufficiency. And currently, Greenland receives $600 million annually in subsidies from Denmark. That's roughly 50% of Greenland's GDP. To achieve independence, they require revenue. Extraction revenue. Beijing's proposition is simple. We will invest 2 to 3 billion in infrastructure and extraction operations. You acquire employment, you acquire royalties, you acquire independence without depending on Denmark. It's compelling. Greenland's politicians perceive Chinese investment as the pathway to sovereignty. Washington and Copenhagen perceive it differently. They cannot permit Beijing to purchase influence in Greenland, but neither desires to expend the resources. Trump's 2019 proposal to acquire Greenland was ridiculed. Denmark called it absurd. But Denmark also didn't propose an alternative. They didn't increase subsidies. They didn't expedite extraction authorizations. They just stated no. So Greenland examines Beijing's proposals and thinks at least someone is willing to invest. This is the geopolitical trap. Greenland desires independence. Denmark desires to maintain sovereignty but doesn't desire to fund it. Washington desires to obstruct Beijing but doesn't desire to write the checks either. And Beijing is perfectly content to step in and finance everything because they're executing a longer strategy. Let's expand perspective. Greenland sits at the center of Arctic rivalry. Thule Air Base, operated by the U.S. Space Force, is located in northwest Greenland. It's crucial for missile defense and satellite monitoring. If Beijing dominates ports and infrastructure near Thule, they can monitor American operations, they can track launches, they can gather intelligence on U.S. missile defense platforms. Then there's transportation. Climate change is opening the Northwest Passage. Arctic ice is retreating. Within a decade, the Northwest Passage will be a viable commercial route from Asia to Europe, shorter than the Suez Canal, faster than the Panama Canal. Whoever dominates Greenland's ports dominates access to that route. 2023, 71 Chinese cargo vessels transited Arctic routes. 2026 projections, over 300 vessels. Beijing is positioning itself as a near-Arctic authority. That's the terminology they employ, near-Arctic. They're normalizing their presence. January 2026. Trump's declaration isn't just rhetoric, it's a signal. Sources in Washington indicate the White House is negotiating a joint investment package with Copenhagen. The transaction includes U.S. financing for Greenland's infrastructure in exchange for obstructing Chinese extraction bids. But timing is crucial. Greenland Minerals is expected to finalize agreements with Chinese investors in Q2 2026. This is why extraction shares are surging. Investors comprehend whoever dominates Greenland's rare earth reserves dominates the subsequent 50 years of technological rivalry. The competition is operational, and currently Beijing is ahead. January 2026, Critical Metals Corp. surges 116% in 3 weeks following Trump's declaration. This isn't retail speculation, this is institutional capital repositioning rapidly, and when institutions reposition this quickly, they comprehend something the marketplace doesn't. Let's examine what's transpiring. Greenland Minerals, ticker GDLNF. This corporation possesses the Kvanefjeld Reserve, the one with 370,000 tons of heavy rare earths. Stock is up 89% since December 2025. But here's the complication. Shenghe Resources, a Chinese rare earth processor, possesses 12.5% of the corporation. If the U.S. administration forces Shenghe to divest, the stock could crash on uncertainty, or it could surge if a U.S. purchaser steps in with administration backing. High risk, high reward, completely binary outcome. Bluejay Mining, ticker BIJD, possesses the Dundas ilmenite operation in Greenland. Ilmenite is employed for titanium dioxide, but the operation also possesses rare earth byproducts. Bluejay is in active discussions with the Pentagon for financing, up 62% year-to-date. This one possesses cleaner ownership. No Chinese stakes. U.S. administration support is probable. Lower risk than Greenland Minerals, but still speculative until financing is finalized. Energy Transition Minerals, ticker ETM, possesses the Sørensen zinc lead operation with rare earth byproducts. This is the under-the-radar strategy. Not much media documentation, but here's what matters. Q4 2025, BlackRock increased its position in energy transition minerals by 340%. Sprott Asset Management, one of the most sophisticated natural resource investors globally, purchased 8.2% of Bluejay Mining. These institutions aren't purchasing on speculation. They're purchasing because they've conducted meetings with White House officials. They comprehend what's approaching. If you don't desire direct exposure to Greenland's political risk, there's another angle. U.S. Rare Earth Processors, MP Materials, ticker MP, possesses the Mountain Pass mine in California. They're currently constructing a refining installation so they must transport ore to Beijing for processing. The Pentagon has committed financing under the Defense Production Act. Stock is up 43% year-to-date. MP Materials is the safest strategy in this space. They possess revenue. They possess administration contracts. They possess operational facilities. Lynas Rare Earths, ticker LYC. Australian corporation constructing a refining installation in Texas with Department of Defense support. If Greenland commences manufacturing rare earth ore, someone must refine it. Lynas is positioning to be that processor. If the U.S. obtains Greenland and requires non-Chinese processing capacity, Lynas benefits directly. The risk here is valuation. Both MP and Lynas are trading at elevated multiples. Short-term, they might retreat, but if Greenland becomes operational, demand for refining capacity explodes, and these are the only two corporations outside Beijing that can handle it at scale. Now here's the contrarian strategy. Some investors are wagering Beijing prevails. China Northern Rare Earth Group is up 28% year to date. The thesis is simple. If Greenland remains inaccessible due to environmental regulations or political deadlock, Beijing's monopoly strengthens, scarcity increases, values rise, Chinese rare earth manufacturers generate profits. This is a zero-sum competition. Either Washington prevails and U.S. shares surge, or Beijing prevails and Chinese rare earth shares consolidate their monopoly. Let's be transparent about the risks. Greenland minerals could multiply tenfold if the U.S. administration forces a purchase of the Chinese stake and injects capital to expedite the operation. Or it could approach zero if Greenland's administration terminates the operation over environmental concerns. That's the range of outcomes. Blue Jay and energy transition minerals are less volatile but offer smaller upside. MP Materials and Lynas are the safest strategies. They already possess revenue, they already possess administration support, but they're also the most expensive on a valuation basis. But whether you invest or not, this confirms one thing. The Greenland rare earth conflict is genuine, and it's transpiring now. This is not the initial occurrence. There's a pattern here that's replicated itself across centuries. And once you observe it, everything transpiring with Greenland makes sense. Stage 1. Financial elites monopolize crucial resources. Stage 2. The framework expands. Everybody thinks it's sustainable. Stage 3. Fractures appear, overextension, debt, debasement. Stage 4. Elites reposition their capital to the subsequent authority center before collapse becomes obvious to the general population. Let's apply this to rare earths. Stage 1, 1990s to 2010s. Beijing monopolizes rare earth refining, while the United States terminates its facilities. Beijing invests substantially. By 2010, Beijing dominates 70% of manufacturing and 90% of processing. Stage 2, 2010 to 2020. Everybody assumes Beijing will remain an inexpensive, reliable supplier. U.S. automakers, defense manufacturers, technology corporations all become dependent. Nobody questions the supply chain. Stage 3, 2019 to 2025. Trade conflict reveals vulnerability. Pentagon realizes Beijing can terminate provision anytime, but administration does nothing. No new facilities, no refining installations. The dependency continues. Stage 4, 2026. Trump issues his declaration. Institutional investors commence purchasing Greenland extraction shares. BlackRock increases positions. Sprott assumes stakes. Elites are repositioning before mainstream comprehends. By the time CNN explains why Greenland matters, BlackRock has finished accumulating. By the time Congress conducts hearings, extraction rights have been secured by either Chinese shell corporations or U.S.-backed firms. This is how the pattern functions. The population comprehends after repositioning is complete, and Greenland is just the opening battle. There are other fronts in this resource conflict. Lithium, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina form the lithium triangle. They hold over 60% of worldwide deposits. Beijing already dominates 60% of lithium refining. Every electric vehicle battery demands lithium. Whoever dominates lithium refining dominates the EV transition. Cobalt. The Democratic Republic of Congo manufactures 70% of worldwide provision. Chinese corporations possess most of the major facilities. Cobalt is indispensable for lithium-ion batteries. Without it, EVs don't function, and Beijing has secured it. Rare earths beyond Greenland, Vietnam, Australia, Kazakhstan. The U.S. is financing exploration in all three, but refining is still the constraint. Beijing dominates 90% of worldwide refining capacity. Here's the framework. Whoever dominates crucial materials dominates the energy transition, dominates AI development, dominates military methodology. In the 20th century, petroleum defined geopolitical authority. In the 21st century, rare earths, lithium, and cobalt define it. And currently, Beijing dominates the supply chain. So, what transpires next? 3 to 6 months. Observe for official U.S.-Denmark-Greenland discussions. If a transaction is reached, expect massive capital injection into Greenland extraction. U.S. shares will surge. Observe Chinese counter-repositions. If Beijing proposes Greenland's superior terms or quietly acquires stakes through shell corporations, U.S. shares crash. Observe the Pentagon. If the Department of Defense declares rare earths a national security priority and invokes the Defense Production Act, subsidies will flow to American extractors. 12 to 24 months. If operations acquire authorization, initial rare earth deliveries from Greenland, refining capacity expands in the US and Europe, or environmental organizations obstruct the operations, Greenland remains dormant. Beijing's monopoly strengthens. Either way, volatility creates opportunity. If you comprehend the pattern, you can position for both scenarios. This is not prediction. This is pattern recognition. The identical mechanism that repositioned British capital to Washington when the pound collapsed. The identical mechanism that repositioned American capital into post-World War I Germany during hyperinflation. The identical mechanism that repositioned Wall Street resources to Beijing 2018 to 2020 during trade conflict theater is repositioning capital into Greenland currently, while Washington argues about sovereignty and colonialism. The population will comprehend after the transactions are signed, after the shares have surged, after Chinese or American corporations have secured the extraction rights. But you comprehend now, and that's the only advantage you require. Who do you think prevails, Greenland, Washington, or Beijing? And how are you positioning? This is transpiring in real time. And unlike every occurrence before, this time you possess the opportunity to observe the pattern while it's executing, not after the collapse is complete.